Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So Joe Biden continues to embarrass himself even as he's forced to stay in his house in Delaware trying to run a presidential campaign. As we played you in our Say What segment, this week's red-faced episode for the cognitively challenged presumptive Democratic presidential nominee was to not realize for the full 17 minutes of an online interview that he wasn't looking at the host. He was not looking at the camera. Of course, this is just another in a long line of head-shaking episodes that has to make you wonder how this guy's going to make it through another 6 months, especially when President Trump starts getting up in his face and releasing a raging river of gaffes committed by the former vice president. Here to help us figure out how, or perhaps whether, Joe Biden can first make it to November intact, what woman he is likely to pick for his running mate, and how he can actually beat Trump, is our chief political correspondent at LibertyNation.com, the outspoken Graham Noble. Hello, Graham.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
Good. Welcome back to the show. Do you think all these gaffes and missteps and misstatements by Joe Biden are actually as big a deal to voters as it might appear?
Well, Tim, I mean, it certainly should be a big deal. And obviously to Trump supporters, Republicans, conservatives in general, and I believe probably to a large percentage of the independents out there, this is a very big deal. It is amazing to me that the vast majority of Democrats seem to be just completely ignoring the whole situation, which I think is, I'm sure they must be worried about it, but they're certainly not publicly admitting any concern.
So Trump will use the stumbling and bumbling against Biden, his inability to take command of a crisis like the one we're in now, but also he's going to bring up the lining of his son's pockets based on his foreign relationships with Ukraine, China, and other countries, that he's captive to a radical agenda from the Democratic Party, his status as the ultimate Washington insider, a male version of Hillary Clinton. Which of these arguments do you think, Graham, will be most effective for Trump?
Well, knowing Trump, he's going to use every single one of those arguments within the space of a few words or a couple of sentences every time he speaks about his prospective opponent. I think really, considering what we're going through at the moment, I believe that it's got to the point where China is, in fact, a huge liability for Biden. In fact, I believe there was a new Pew Research Center poll that just came out that says that China's unfavorability rating, for want of a better term, in the US is currently something like 66% or something. 66% of Americans who responded to that survey said they have an unfavorable view of China. And I believe that in the same survey, something like it was either 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 Americans view China as a threat. And I think Biden's undeniable connections, shall we say, to that country is going to prove a liability to him.
Well, of course, Joe Biden has for years been a defender of our relationship with China. And when President Trump shut down the border or shut down flights, shut down travel from and to China, Joe Biden said that it was totally unwarranted and that Trump is a xenophobe, to which Trump responded, I don't think Joe Biden even knows what that word means. But you're right. He's going to have an awful lot of splaining to do about his longtime defense of China. But what in turn do you think Biden's best issues will be for attacking Trump?
I think what he's going to do is he's going to try to hit Trump on our disintegrating economy, and he's going to try to play some verbal jujitsu there in terms of making it seem as though the economy and the mess that it's in is actually all down to Trump's not handling the coronavirus issue correctly.
It seems like Trump can't win for losing because he can claim that he held down the deaths, but at the expense of an economy that is tanking and that he shouldn't have ordered the whole country shut down, even though we had few deaths. But if we have a lot of deaths, they'll say he didn't do enough. So, I mean, in other words, there's really nothing he can do that he isn't going to be attacked on. So it's all just a matter of what angle the Democrats are going to come from. Now, given that Joe Biden clearly appears to be on, shall we say, the other side of the hill, he'd be the oldest president to take the oath of office at 78 years old. He'd be 82 at the end of his first term when he'd run for 4 more years. Biden's running mate, his selection for vice president, is likely going to be far more important than usual. He's committed to picking a woman. Who would be the best choice?
I think that there are no good options for him, quite frankly. Everyone you can think of has got some issues. Let's say it's hard to from a Democrat's point of view. I think it's hard to argue that Elizabeth Warren is not probably his best choice, although, of course, she is not a woman of color, unless, of course, you count the 1024th part Native American that she is. But everybody is going on about, checking the identity politics boxes. He's got to pick a running mate who is a woman of color. But, you can't help thinking that from a point of view of name recognition, somewhat of a loyal following, even though they didn't come through for her in the primaries, and also fundraising power, it's hard to argue that Elizabeth Warren is not perhaps his best choice.
Then there's Stacey Abrams, a woman that came within, maybe not a heartbeat, but very close to winning the governor's seat in Georgia, and she became a rising star in the Democratic Party, but she didn't win the governorship. So she's never held elective office beyond the Georgia state level. But there's a lot of enthusiasm for her on the whole identity politics thing. She checks all the boxes that you could possibly check. She's very well spoken. She's passionate. She's also very left wing. What would you say about her as a running mate? Would she be good? Would she help Biden? Would she hurt him? Would she make no difference?
It's hard to say. I mean, Biden's problem here almost is that he, whether any Democrats want to admit it or not, he really does have to choose a running mate who is capable of taking over as president. I mean, because for a start, even in the event that Biden were to win in November and become president, I don't see a path for him to serve a second term. I really don't. I think if he did win, he's absolutely going to be a one-term president if he even makes it through his first term. So on the one hand, he's got to pick a running mate who is seen by people as competent to jump into the role of the chief executive and commander-in-chief at a moment's notice almost. But also he needs to pick a running mate who's not going to actually upstage him during the campaign.
How's he going to achieve that?
Well, that's exactly, Tim. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I'm glad you don't, because I certainly don't.
No. If I knew the answer to that question, then I guess I'd be running Biden's campaign.
Graham, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.
Graham Noble, chief political correspondent for LibertyNation.com. We'll take a quick break and come back with Talkin' Liberty.